Hello and welcome back here to another episode of the Big 12 Huddle. As always here, I am your host, Calvin Glenn Alexander, host of the CGA Tour podcast, joined again today here by Roger Phipps with the UCF podcast, your Golden Knight podcast for all Golden Knight fans.
No, not golden. We're not golden.
No?
No.
You're just Knights? It's just the Knights. Color gold? And I've always seen the color gold?
We've always had black and gold. There's the Black Knights, which are Army. Then you've got the Scarlet Knights, which is Rutgers, and you just got the Knights, which is UCF.
All right, I stand very corrected then. But you've got the Knights and the Knighted Ones. So
yes,
yeah, we've got Roger here as well. We're gonna run through a list of topics here. Basically here in the Big 12, we know you just saw the Big 10 Huddle do the coaches on the hot seat, so we'll get to that at some point here. But we want to do a ranking of the best quarterbacks in the Big 12. Then we want to talk about the NCAA settlement here with the Group of Five, Power 4, whatever you want to say now as well too, is what we'll lead it off here with. And so, Roger, I do want to ask you, Power 3, I guess. Yeah, the ACC's gone.
So the ACC's demise is looming.
It's gone. Yeah. If you don't get a chance, listen to the last podcast for the Big 12 Huddle. That's what we talked about. We talked about basically Big 12 grabbing a couple of ACC teams. So go back and listen to that one there. Will be Florida State, Clemson, Miami, or all of the above best ones. But with that being said here, I just want to get some background here. Basically, if you can give the listener, viewer, just some info on the settlement here and what it means for NCAA and then the athletes here.
Yeah, so this all goes back to the O'Bannon lawsuit and a bunch of other lawsuits that have been going on for literally, I think it's somewhere around 7 or 8 years, right? So what this is it's a class action lawsuit that is basically saying, hey, the athletes should have been able to monetize their name, image, and likeness in the past. And they've figured out that in the years that the class is included, it's approximately $2.8 billion, that's billion with a B, dollars of money that needs to be paid back to the athletes in the class. So the way that they've kind of postured this is they've kind of been figuring out, okay, the settlement's on the table. The NCAA wants the backing of the plaintiffs to say that they should be student athletes, right, and not employees, so that there's tax advantages. So they're going to go to Congress and basically try to get them to classify and codify that, student athletes are student athletes and should not be classified as employees so that they keep the tax advantages. Now, lately, the conversation has been around who pays for this, right? And if you remember the discussion around the playoff and how the playoff money was going to be distributed with the new channel or the new distribution method, the SEC and Big Ten said, hey, we're going to have to carry the vast majority of the cost. And so we should get a larger distribution of the playoff money than what the Big 12 and the ACC should, right? So lo and behold, now we find out the NCAA is actually going to be carrying the 60% of the cost of this lawsuit. So the way the NCAA is going to do this is they're going to reduce the revenue distributions from their main monetary source, which is the tournament. So over the next 10 years, there'll be a reduction in distributions from the NCAA tournament to the individual conferences, which actually by consequence means that the ACC is paying the most from that distribution and losing the most of that from that distribution over any other conference. So the SEC and Big Ten, the Big Ten's been pretty good in basketball. The SEC's not so much. So they argued to have the most revenue share out of the new playoff money because they're going to pay the most, but then ended up paying less than just about everybody because the distributions from the NCAA are going to be reduced the least for them. So that's an interesting part of it. The other part about this is as of right now, and everybody signed on to this, all the conferences have signed on to this, the G5 representatives did push back on this, right? Because they're also going to be asked to carry 10% of this, and the rest will be split amongst the ACC and the Big 12. And for FCS conferences and lower level G5 conferences, they're saying, hey, this is about 30% of my budget. I'm not going to be able to afford to pay this. So it's really, really interesting on what that dynamic is. They did push back, but basically they didn't require a unanimous vote, which in the NCAA's world, you always see a unanimous vote. There was none. It was just a majority vote, and the power conferences pushed it through. What this does for the power conferences, it effectively ends the legislation or their exposure legally to any more of these lawsuits. And it provides a structure for NIL going forward. So NIL is not going away. There is a salary cap that's being introduced now. To the tune of, I think it's 20% of whatever, or not 20%, I think it's 50% of whatever their total distributions are from TV revenue and NCAA revenue credits. Actually, I correct myself. I was right the first time. It's 20% of that is the salary cap. Plus, the players have the opportunity to earn NIL agreements. So the collectives themselves aren't going away. However, there have been enforcement provisions put in place that allow the NCAA to be a little more heavy-handed when it comes to these NIL contracts. So that is where we are generally today, but it's a seismic shift for Big 12 teams. That's going to equate to about $22 million per year in expenditure versus what they have today. So $2 million a year will be NCAA credits in distribution that each Big 12 team will be missing. And it's about $20 million in player compensation on a go-forward basis that schools will have to participate in. So you look at the Big 12's contract, we thought we had a big win with it going up to about $50 million in distribution, but it's going to net out to somewhere around $28 million in net distribution to the Big 12. So it'll be really interesting for a lot of people that are leveraged, and this is where you hear people like UNC screaming at the top of their lungs, for facilities and other things, because they don't want to show net profitability. It'll be really interesting to see what Big 12 teams do with what's effectively a reduction or about the same, because I think they were distributed in 23. I think we distributed somewhere around 38 to 40 million to each team. It'll effectively be a reduction in distribution after all of this is paid out.
And what I think is really interesting here is that how much the schools have to put up money-wise, right? This was an NCAA deal. This is an NCAA sanction. At the end of the day, everyone wants to be done with it, wants to move on. We all want to see college football 25 release, not NCAA 25, if anyone's noticing. But we want to see college football, 25 release, get out there and just have years and years of that, and maybe some basketball follows it, etc., and just be done with this overall. Every school, every conference wants to be put past this, but also this is majority of the money, the majority of the money is going towards the football and basketball players and not really any of their programs or athletes who, just to be honest, are not the same revenue producing. I mean, I don't think I'm putting anything in a bad terms or bad light there. This is going to the revenue producing sports. This is not going to Title IX sports or the sports that have to be, there due to Title IX laws and regulations as well.
Yeah, that's one of the things that's interesting too, is even, the Title IX implications. There was no requirement to distribute the proceeds from the legal aspects of this to along the same Title IX restrictions that you have today as far as scholarships are concerned. As far as the payrolls are concerned, my understanding is they do not apply. The Title IX restrictions also do not apply to that aspect as well. And since they are not employees, technically, they are still student athletes, then, there's fair labor practices that would apply with regard to, the gender specific sports that are not going to be in play here as well. So, yeah, it's super interesting. The vast majority of it will go football and basketball. I think it's up to the schools to dictate. From what I understand, there's only a salary cap for the entire program. How they distributed that to individual players and what they're paying them is going to be up to these new general manager roles that we've seen popping up at power schools here recently.
Yeah, and the general manager thing is something I think we could spend forever on talking about this offseason, but it's not a role that I really thought would come up in any way, shape, or form over the past, 10 years ago. If you said, hey, there'll be general managers, I'd go, what are we talking about? And I think that ultimately leads to, hey, we've got to do all this NIL stuff. So we've got to be by the book. We've got to, kind of figure it out here as we go along as well. So some schools are going to get sanctioned, some are not. And we've seen Oklahoma State fans have seen how that can pertain to them versus how it can pertain to KU when it comes down to sanctions and, basketball and other sports. But with that being said, what I'm getting at here is I think in the future, the NIL will just be, all right, hey, you know what? It's from a different tax bracket or a different necessarily company and entity name that goes towards the players. But besides that, it's coming from the school. It's you can donate straight to the NIL through the school, and you don't need a kind of a middleman or, hey, the car dealership here wants to somehow get Colin Oliver, for example, Oklahoma State linebacker, in and really wants to hype him up because they think they could have a good break on how much money to give him, but also a really good social media presence on how it works out for them and let them rent a car for a year, basically. And that's what they're currently doing. But instead of it being, okay, well, they contact me or you or whoever, there's somebody at the school, they do it through, and that's the general manager. And it's all very straightforward, which is, I think, what we're building towards, but it's no way a finished product unless you see it that way of how the NIL is kind of working out with paying players.
Yeah, NIL, and I want to make sure we're making this distinction, right? So with regard to the general manager role, they are going to be managing the salary, right? So that's the salary cap that the school can pay directly to the student athletes. NIL will still exist. So that's a whole nother separate revenue source. However, they've put in place safeguards. We haven't seen all of them, but from what I understand, there was a big push from some of the power schools and the SEC schools as well to get that under control, right? And to give the NCAA teeth, because let's be real, everybody knows, they're talking to a teammate. There was an article recently where people are approaching people after a game and like, hey, you're a really good player. We've got some transfers opening up. We'd love to consider, you should, if you decide to transfer, we'd love to talk to you about it, kind of thing, right? Which is skirting the issue, but this is on the field, right? So after a game. So when we're talking about folks that are, trying to induce others, which is technically illegal, right? Per the NCAA rules, it's happening. And the NIL, until we get an understanding of what those rules look like, what you've got is essentially what we have today, because a lot of schools had the ability to pay their student athletes, but there was a cap on it. It was like $5,000 or $10,000 on top of their scholarship, on top of whatever they have. It's just trying to shift more of that money into the school where it's controlled more. And what's really going to be interesting about it is the creative accounting that's done within each school to be able to pay that, which then, if they're directing some of the NIL money back in, then they can put it back towards facilities and other commitments that they have. It's going to be the Wild West with more rules, but it's still to your point, it's a progressive step, but it's not the final step in what this is all going to look like.
Yeah, it's very interesting to see how this will play out going forward, because I think from anyone who's not basically I think the big blue bloods of college football and basketball, anyone who's not one of those is going, okay, well, what are the advantages here? And I think the advantages stand really clear and precise that, for example, the Oklahoma State Boom Pickens of the world and those other big donors that are out there, those can just, directly transfer the money and directly get 5 stars on the roster. One of the, not to bring this all the way into Oklahoma State fandom, but at this point, that's who I am, is that the main thing that Oklahoma State fans go, hey, what if Gundy had a 5-star guy, right? Like, we're really good at building up 2 and 3 stars. What if he had a 5-star guy? Well, all of a sudden, a donor can just go, well, hey, you know what? I want to make sure this guy goes there for 2 years, right? And he just goes, whatever it takes money-wise, call me up, let me know, and I'll send the check. And all of a sudden, that'll be very figured out, very easy to see. And once it looks like that, and it's no longer, hey, Red Bomar's working at the dealership down in the Big Red Sooner Sports and Imports down in Norman, and it's, oh wait, what is he doing? Okay, he's watering the lawn once every month for whatever. Once it's no longer that, and it's just very, hey, this guy's gonna put out social media that he loves this company and industry and really supports it, and that's it, and there's a contract and it's all legal and above the books, then I think we'll even see even more money change hands, but it won't be the murky waters of this Tennessee recruit for quarterback got $8 million and then he switched schools because he wasn't going to get it, and then he was, and all this other back and forth stuff. And we won't see a Hunter, I want to call him a Hunter Dickinson transfer from Michigan to KU and then stay back at KU. But why would he transfer to KU from Michigan when Michigan seems to be so good? And I know that's kind of a long explanation to say Michigan, we all know what happened this past year in college basketball. Well, he made a good decision, but still.
Look at Rashada.
Yeah.
Okay. So Rashada literally a couple days ago just sued UF and the NIL donor who was supposed to be offering. Remember, he was supposed to get $1 million on the day of signing when he signed with UF, and they reneged on it and he canceled it. And now he's suing them.
Which is, that's exactly the kind of thing where it's, okay, so what happens there? How does this legislation work out? Because we're seeing all these new ideas and new things come to light, right? It's going to be kind of a huge deal.
If I'm a donor and I see that, I mean, it's one thing to be kicked out of a collective or whatever, which the Gators did, and they actually changed the collective completely. Like, they started a new collective and kicked the guy out that was part of it, that was doing all this and everything else. But let's take a step back. If I'm a donor, number one, I'm spending money on a guy who, who just may or may not pan out. And I'm going to spend that kind of money. The average quarterback gets somewhere in between $500,000 to $800,000 for their agreement. Okay. I'm not going to say I know this for a fact, but let's just say KJ Jefferson made somewhere between $600,000 and $800,000 to come to UCF. You have no way of knowing if this guy is going to work out. So when do boosters get tired of doing that way instead of distributing it to everybody else? Now, what you're seeing more now is you're seeing more boosters saying, hey, we're going to do this for the team, and then you need to distribute it amongst the team. That's a better use of their money than if they're putting it all towards one player, in my opinion, because you still got to field a roster around them. And if I'm going to do this and I put this money on here and now I'm going to get called out and sued, if Rashada is successful and they either settle or something comes out of it, that's got to give boosters pause.
Yeah.
Would you rather start putting that money into the school for for either the buildings and or salary pool, or would you rather put it into the NIL where you have exposure? And I'm going to guess it's the former, not the latter.
Yeah, especially when you can be known as the donor who, hey, I got this recruit to campus, and he's an NFL draft pick, right? It worked out all perfectly. He's an NFL draft pick. He's almost thanking you on stage, inviting you to the green room, but not really. And I think it can also work out the other way, where he could just be a transfer after a year because he didn't get enough playing time, or you could donate your money just towards the school, and then all of a sudden your name's on the school. You know, you're the Humphreys who donated the video board at Oklahoma State or whatever it may be, right? And then all of a sudden you go, hey, well, that's what we did, and that's how our money was spent and where it went. Now, you probably are donating a large portion of money, much bigger, but who knows? I mean, some of these recruits, if you're Rashada, then you're supposed to get so much money. Well, what if the donor instead spent the money somewhere else? Would that have been a name on entry 6 gate or whatever, for example, as well, too, instead of being basically in court because they backed out at the last second or just didn't believe what was going on?
Well, I mean, OSU, for example, I mean, we've talked about it in the past, right? Because you are the rep for OSU. In the NIL, department, OSU did not rank very high amongst the other Big 12 teams, right? So do you think this will make a difference for schools like that? And then if you start thinking about teams like Stanford and Cal, who said, Stanford blatantly said, if we start paying players, I'm not going to participate in football anymore. So, Stanford, it's time to put your money where your mouth is. Now, we know you have the money, but are you going to hold up to that, right? So, this is, again, professionalism without it being professional because of the tax implications that are involved for all the member schools. And I'll tell you this right now. When the playoff was being postured, right, and there wasn't agreement on the distribution, the Big 12, the distribution cycle was going to be essentially the same, which is the 4 power conferences distribute that 60% evenly, right? The SEC, there's been stories come out recently. The SEC and the Big Ten had serious talks about leaving. They were so angry about how that went down. And then now when we went back into this next round, all of a sudden that distribution changed, right? But here we go again. That was supposed to be based on the amount that they were going to be paying towards this NIL lawsuit. And they will be paying more, but not the same percentage more that they're getting the college football playoff money. So it's extremely interesting how this all shakes out.
It really is. And we'll only get more and more info over the next couple of months and even years as all of this basically just changes. I don't want to say overnight, but for a while there was the worst you could do is the SMU death penalty. And then I don't think anyone was ever getting the death penalty per se after that. You were getting scholarships taken away where it was kind of like the death penalty, but not. And then some other sanctions were happening, etc. But now we're in a whole new world where just how much strength does the NCAA want to try to flex is what I'd say. You know, how much power do they really want to try to show in all of this, in this whole NIL world?
They want to flex it. I can tell you that right now. They've had no teeth. Now, the other part about this that's interesting, since we're talking about the ACC a lot on here tonight, the Big 12, we have our contract locked in for our TV revenue dollars, right? Mm-hmm. The ACC has a lesser amount locked in, right? And for the TV contract, and then they are making the rest, a lot of it on their tourney credits and their network. So it'll be interesting because their TV dollars for salary cap is based off of their 20% is based off of that total conference distribution. We don't know if that includes the network partnerships, because the network partnerships aren't TV contracts. They're partnerships between the network and the individual group of schools or conference. So are they going to have a smaller salary cap than what the rest of the power conferences are, because their TV contract is for less, and so they'll be capped at a lower amount than what the rest of us will be. So that'll be another interesting portion of that. Same way for the Big Ten. will that be included or not? Because it's a separate entity and a separate agreement with a separate corporation. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out too.
It really, really will be. Well, with that being said, though, we'll keep everyone up to date, and we'll also stay updated on that as we go forward. The next topic that we have for the night here is we want to talk about the best quarterbacks here, the best quarterback in the Big 12 here. So as we talk about that, there's quite a few quarterbacks in the Big 12 that I think could have a shot at the Heisman Trophy, or at least be in the discussions. With that being said here, I'll let you kick it off. Do you think Jalon Daniels is the best quarterback in the Big 12? I've seen that kind of been floated around here from the KU fans and other faithful, and I'm not on the same page here.
I think it's KJ Jefferson. No, just kidding. Honestly, I think we have an underrated group of quarterbacks in the Big 12 right now. If you think about it, what do you consider, or how do you look at it, from a quarterback perspective? Do you look at their statistics? Do you look at their potential? Do you look at who they're on? I do think Daniels, the problem with Daniels, honestly, is he's a good quarterback, but he's not proven because he's been injured. So I would say he's good when he's playing, right? But he's been injured for a lot of time. So is he the most effective or best quarterback? Who knows? Someone like Cam Rising comes to mind for me. He's really been very productive for Utah. Utah's had a lot of success, and statistically he's very good. So I expect Cam Rising to be good this year too, and we'll be playing him in the Black Friday game this year. So I hope he's not that good, but he's a real strong quarterback. So I like to think someone who's more proven, and I think Jalon Daniels, from a skill set perspective, could be the best quarterback in the league. Yes, I do think he could be. Do I think he has the durability that he needs to be the best quarterback in the league? I don't think that that's the case. But I think from a skills perspective, if you're talking about a dual threat type of quarterback, he can hurt you, and he's a very, very strong quarterback.
Yeah, when I look up the Big 12 Conference Total QBR 2023, granted we've got several quarterbacks on the list here who are not making it going forward. He's just not on the list, really. I mean, he's just injured all the time. And The first time he's on the list, he's 26, and it's a win versus Illinois last year. And that's great and all, but at the same point, you've got, listen, I love Alan Bowman. I'll be a homer all day, but he's ranked above him for some of his games. And I'm no idiot, I like to think, where Alan Bowman's a really good quarterback, but he's not making the top 5 of a Heisman Trophy list. He's not putting up the game-winning numbers to kill you. And that was really our running game last year for Oklahoma State. So when you're, putting Alan Bowman here, just, hey, you know what? The game against OU, he's right there at Jalon Daniels. And as far as QBR, he's actually got better QBR and ranks better above him. I just don't get it. I don't really love I don't get all the love for Jalon Daniels unless it's all just, hey, it's hope and pray. And that's what, at least I'm looking on Athlon Sports. Yeah. I've watched him play enough where I've gone, crap, hopefully we don't have to play him. And then the past 2 years, we haven't had to play him. We played Jason Bean instead. So who was good and the starter before Daniels was. And he started after Daniels went down. And he was also a good quarterback. Exactly. He beat Oklahoma State 2 years ago. Last year does not. But at the same point, I'm always going, okay, well, if Jalon Daniels is this good and he gets a chance to play, then okay, maybe he could be the best quarterback. But I don't love Athlon Sports' rankings here of them putting him at number 1, where it's like, okay, they lost their offensive coordinator and their offensive play caller. He went off to Penn State for KU. So what's Jalon Daniels going to look like in year 3 of fully healthy and trying to be good? And it's kind of
let me say this about that. Lance Leopold has brought his staff and his system with him everywhere that he's gone. So the staff that's left, right, and the system that he's been using is not going to change because the offensive coordinator left. So what I will say to that is that I don't believe the coordinator is material in this case because he continues to use every stop that he's been. I think he was at Buffalo before, when he was at Buffalo and was really successful there, he used that same system and had that same staff. So he'll have someone to plug and play for offensive coordinator role, and he will keep the same system. What I'm more concerned with is, are we measuring the potential or are we measuring the proof in the pudding, right? And so, yes, a lot of these guys on these lists have good success, but a lot of these guys on this list have skill sets as well. So I think it's skills versus what we've seen out of them. Like for example, the little I saw of Avery Johnson last year from K-State, he could be the best quarterback on this list. And he was very highly touted, 4-star quarterback. He's physical. He's got a great arm. He runs the ball well, and he's got the flowing locks, of course. But legitimately speaking, he could be the best quarterback in the Big 12 this year. We haven't seen him enough to understand or know if he's going to be that guy. But if you can't stay on the field, it doesn't matter. It's immaterial what your skill set is because you aren't making a difference for your team. So for that reason, I wouldn't say he's the best quarterback in the league this year.
Yeah, and I think this also comes down to, like you're saying, definition of best quarterback, right? Best quarterback, in my definition, and for me, is you're making it to the conference championship game at least. You are a part of a 10-win plus team, and you're leading that team to 10 plus wins because that's how good you are as a quarterback. And when you're KU, where it's, hey, we're making it back to another bowl game, this is great, then I don't think you're kind of in line here for best quarterback. If KU wins 10 games this year, that'll be phenomenal. That'll be achieving. That'll be historic for their football program. But does that mean that he'll be the best quarterback in Big 12 because he led KU to 10 wins if they don't make the conference championship game? Not necessarily in my book. And same kind of going on here with the rest of this list here of, okay, you've got Arizona and Noah Fafita, right? He's one of the top freshmen last year. He's coming into a brand new conference. Could probably make a lot of new waves. Same deal there with Shedur Sanders. Coming into a brand new conference, making a lot of new waves. But the way that they separate themselves is one is a really household name one's going to be on the cover of NCAA, and his dad's a Hall of Famer, and his dad's pushing him a lot. There's a lot of press for him. The other one could be the dark horse, Heisman-ish candidate who no one really sees coming if we're really talking about a big story narrative. And I don't see Noah Fafita being the best quarterback in the Big 12 or being the second best quarterback in the Big 12 here from getting the same site in the rankings, just because I don't think Arizona's that good. On the other hand, I will say, I thought Will Howard could be incredible, but clearly Avery Johnson with K-State, who they've moved on to and said, hey, we're happy with Johnson, he could be the best, and he's not top 5 on this list. So it's kind of, I think K-State, Utah, and Oklahoma State are the 3 teams that are the preliminary front runners for making it to the Big 12 Conference Championship. And I don't think Bowman's going to be the best quarterback because I think our running back and our running game is the definition of who Oklahoma State should be this year, and our defense. But we've just got enough playmakers where Bowman just needs to basically get some good throws and let the rest of the guys do the job. I could see Shedur Sanders here being the best quarterback just because then I'm really, really caving my definition of what best quarterback is, though. Because then Sanders, it's like he's got no one else besides Travis Hunter on the team, right? So there's kind of the both sides of the story here, and maybe I'm faulting a little bit with my own definition. But where do you see these newcomers ranking in as well?
As far as the new teams coming to the conference, and are we talking about the team or are we talking about the quarterbacks?
Well, so how much difference do you think there is? So, like, what is your definition of best quarterback? Because I think I just laid out mine of best quarterback means that your team also has really good success. Whereas I know that's not necessarily just right with it.
So I'm going to say, it's interesting because, 247, since we're talking about different lists, right? So 247 has Shedur Sanders from Colorado as number 1. Noah Fifita from Arizona is number 2, right? So 2 new quarterbacks. Utah's Cam Rising, number 3. And remember, he was out with injury for most of last year because of a knee injury. So it'll be interesting to see how good he is after coming back from that knee injury. Having seen Mackenzie Milton after coming back after a pretty devastating knee injury, it's going to be tough. And then you've got Jalon Daniels from Kansas as number 4. So do I think Noah Fifita and Shedur Sanders are the best quarterbacks? I would rather go with Cam Rising, but I haven't seen him in a year and post-injury. I think he's one of the top quarterbacks. I would say Noah Fifita and Shedur Sanders have the opportunity to be, but they haven't proven it to me yet. Remember, Jed Fish also left Arizona, so it'll be interesting to see how the new coaching staff works with Fifita. And this is basically going to be a new freshman year over for him again, because it's going to be a different offensive system that he's going to be playing in versus what he played in last year. So, and he only played a portion of last year after injury. So I won't say that he's the top QB. I honestly feel like Cam Rising would be my number 1 with an asterisk based on his knee injury. I would probably say Avery Johnson would be my number 2. And yeah, I'd say KJ Jefferson number 3. Now, can Shedur Sanders develop himself and make himself into a number 1 quarterback? Yes, but I don't think he has the team, nor did he have the offensive line around him to be able to dominate the way that he should have. They had halves where they went and they were world beaters, and then halves where they just disappeared. So they lost some talent last year at the receiver position. So for me, it'll be really, really interesting to see whether he can succeed and whether he is the best quarterback. From a skills perspective, I could see Jalon Daniels, if we're just talking about skill set and talent, being number 1. I could see Noah Fifita being number 2. I could see Shedur Sanders being number 3. But again, the measure of a quarterback is not just the skills, it's whether they can stay on the field and whether they can lead the team to victory and be consistent. And it's hard to argue Shedur Sanders' 27-3 touchdown to interception ratio. I mean, that's a phenomenal number. But that's not all there is to winning a football game as a quarterback.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's a lot to be said for Sanders trying to be too cute, just trying to do too much as well. How much does he play within himself and knows what his strengths and what they can do? Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Overconfident. That's the challenge, right? He's overconfident. So it's good to be confident. He's been told his entire life that he was great. He came from a smaller school and then went to a Power 5 school after he followed his dad. And that's a totally different level, right, that you're playing on there. And there were times that he was completely shut down for entire halves. So until that changes, and I see that consistently from him, I don't think he's the top quarterback in the Big 12.
Yeah, I think KJ Jefferson could be, but with the team success, how good do you think this UCF team is going to be this year? Right? I mean, you're the guy to ask here on this.
They've built this team to succeed this year. I think it would be a disappointment if they didn't make it to to the game in Utah and not be in the discussion and have that as a material game for the Big 12 championship. I'll be completely blatant, and I'm not putting my black and gold glasses on here, right? When it comes to all of this, if you're asking me, the team was built that way. We brought in a lot of transfers. We upgraded defensively massively, and that was what hurt us last year, is because we had trouble stopping the run. You'll see a new system this year. You've got a coordinator that isn't a first-year defensive coordinator in Ted Roof. So, a lot of this vanilla defenses that we saw from our team, that's gone. Let me tell you, from the practices, there's going to be a lot of disguised blitzing. We brought in cornerbacks. We brought in, I think it was 6 linebackers upgraded in size massively, and talent level, everybody that we brought in. So I think offensively, this team was good. Before we bring back a very strong running attack. KJ Jefferson is not J.R. Plumlee, because he's the type that will escape the pocket but will try to throw first, versus JRP, which was another running back who tried to or could throw when he wasn't injured. So that's a totally different mentality. You've got 2 1,400-yard plus running backs as the number 1 and 2 running back position. And then you've got a third running back, Miles Montgomery, who was Cincinnati's second leading rusher, as the third. So you've got a running back room. You've got KJ Jefferson. He'll be able to move. He isn't going to be like he was in Arkansas, running for his life and changing systems 3 times in 3 years. He's a lot more durable as far as size is concerned. JRP, the way that he was used, he's about 6 foot, about 210 pounds. KJ Jefferson's a lot bigger and a lot heavier. If you saw some of the pictures of him recently, I hope he slims down a little bit. But he's a lot more durable quarterback, and he's played against SEC defenses and was successful. Leading passer in Arkansas history. So people don't understand that KJ Jefferson, he was in a really bad situation last year with a terrible offensive line, new offensive system, and another new coordinator that did not play to his strengths with the offense that he was playing, and his offensive line was atrocious. He was running the entire year last year. So do I think KJ Jefferson could be? Yes. Look at who he was his sophomore year. There were a lot of rumblings about him being a Heisman candidate at that time. If he's got a stable system and he's got the wide receivers, he's got running backs, he's got the offensive line, and he's finally got a defense, I think he's going to win a lot of games. And, he's a good deep passer, not so much in the intermediate game. And we're going to either stretch the field or we're going to pound the rock. So totally different philosophy this year.
All right. Well, before we move on to who's going to Omaha from the Big 12 baseball tournament, also
who knows at this point? All the low seeds were all eliminated.
Hey, if you stayed up, we're recording this on on Friday, May 24th. But if you stayed up last night to watch the UCF Oklahoma State game all the way until today, literally the 24th, props to you as an Oklahoma State fan. But the UCF fans got the payoff, of course, is our kryptonite. But with that being said, last question I have is, I'm going to ask from the non-orange tinted glasses, where do you think Alan Bowman ranks as far as Big 12 quarterbacks? Is he middle of the pack? Is he just kind of bottom of the spectrum? Because everything I read about him goes, well, yeah, he put up these stats and he was all right, but he tossed the most interceptions last year in the Big 12. So, yeah, he had 14, which isn't like 38, but still, 14's not great. So, want to ask you, a little more of a non-biased guy. Where do you see Alan Bowman?
Honestly, I don't think he's going to be able to shine one way or the other. I don't think we'll know. I don't think we know how good he can be, because you guys are going to go heavy on the running attack again. With Ollie Gordon coming back, I think it's going to be a facilitator type of role. he's accurate and consistent. I think he can run a system, and he can be a check for Ollie Gordon. But I don't see him as a potential difference maker. I think he's going to be a good game manager, right? And that's all he's going to be asked to do. Whether he is or not, we won't know. And so for me, if I'm going to say that, if we're talking about effectiveness relative to the team, he's got a 61% completion rate, which is decent. He had 3,600 or 3,400 yards through the air. So that's pretty good. That's really good, actually, especially when you offset it with Ollie Gordon. I just don't think he's going to be the engine that drives the bus. I think that's Ollie Gordon all year long, and I think the system's going to be built around him. So I can't say I would put him middle of the pack, just because we're not going to be able to see that, other than the fact that he's got a good completion percentage and he's got some yardage. He can throw the long bomb when he needs to.
Yeah, and also I'd add on to that from the other's perspective here, from those orange-tinted glasses, I'd say Deshaun Stribling, who missed 4 games and then went down with an injury as well, wide receiver for Oklahoma State. Him getting injured while he was one of the bright spots last year, wide receiver, before all the injuries happened, I think he's got a real chance to make a name for himself. And then Brennan Presley and Rashad Owens are also going to be those guys who are making great catches down the field and return for their 5th and 6th seasons as well. So I think the wide receiver room has more of a chance making a good name, and not necessarily making, they might make Bowman look really good is my point here as well too. It won't really be just the Bowman show. I don't think we're seeing a Mason Rudolph to Washington type of deal. I think we're seeing a mixture of receivers, including Taylor Shretton and Cale Cabanis, also working in there as well too, just to make the Oklahoma State offense look a little bit better. And that's kind of what I see overall.
Yeah, it's going to depend a lot on if they're playing more ball control than ground and pound, right? And I think that has a lot to do with the defense and how comfortable they are with the defense and the upgrades that they've made this year. So for me, I think that's going to be the biggest indicator of whether. Let's be real. Everybody coming to the Big 12, ourselves included, we were expecting air raid offenses. We didn't get that last year. It was all ground and pound. Baylor, unfortunately, was a perfect example of that. And Dave Aranda, I think we saved his job. But it will be interesting from that perspective on whether OSU chooses to leverage that ability to air it out, or they ride Ollie Gordon the rest of the year. And I think that's going to be dictated by the number of touches they want him to have.
Yeah, they've gotten two transfers at running back as well too, and that I think that one's from Arkansas and one's from Indiana, and both of them seem to be a little bit of a help there in the change of pace and give Ollie Gordon still a lot of stats, but not necessarily be the only workhorse in the backfield who has to do everything like he did last year, and this gives him just a little bit of breaks. So, with that being said, also of course here want to talk about Omaha and want to ask you, who do you think's going from Big 12 baseball? I mean, it looks like Oklahoma State may have to. We're going to have to play Texas Tech again here this weekend. Again, recording this on Friday the 24th. But
poor Texas Tech, man.
I mean, they're in a tough spot there. But when it comes down to it, I mean, basically the championship games are Saturday tomorrow night, and everything should be figured out by then. But you've got UCF with another later one, definitely late for East Coast folks like yourself.
2 o'clock in the morning, man.
yeah, that's a tough time for it to end. But you got again tonight, where it's an 8:30 first pitch is scheduled, so we'll see when it actually does take place. So, and of course, that's going to be against
yesterday's game was scheduled for 8:30, and it didn't start till like 10:30, and we're already an hour behind as of the recording right now.
Yeah, and here's the tough part for anyone who's curious. You basically, the Oklahoma State versus Texas Tech game is at 4 Central is what I'm going to go with time-wise, because that's where the game's been played. And then the winner of that plays UCF. So it's just you go from literally finishing the game to just going right back to another one. If something crazy happens in that Texas Tech OSU game where it gets to be longer and you get a lot of pitchers involved, or one guy gets rocked and then they end up coming back, etc. It doesn't leave a lot of room for error for that comeback. But we could talk all throughout this, but by the time you're listening to this on Monday, you're going to know who won. So I want to ask you instead, Big 12 baseball, we know the lower seeds are kind of doing really good and really winning. UCF's definitely proven that they should make it to at least to the postseason. But who do you see going to Omaha from the Big 12?
To be honest with you, probably Oklahoma as of who's left right now. Texas, I lost a lot of respect for. OSU has had a great pitching staff all year long. Well, they kind of settled in. The first part of the season, it was a mixed bag. But really, I think it was like March-ish. OSU really picked it up. You've got a strong top of the lineup, right? The front end of the lineup is really, really strong. Your pitching, it had the lowest ERA in the league. So OSU has a chance there. OU seems to be able to pull out wins. The only one that they didn't pull out recently is Cincinnati. So I don't have a lot of faith in Texas Tech. OU's a good baseball team. OSU's a really good baseball team. You guys actually, as it pertains to the tournament, you've got two strong arms left. So it'll be interesting to see how you use them, especially if we play you again. But if I had to pick someone, and I know I hate to say this because they're on their way out, then they're rivals for you. I think OU has the best shot. And OSU is pretty close there as well with some rest.
Yeah, the story with Oklahoma State baseball is let's avoid Dallas Baptist. Just for whatever reason, every single time we play Dallas Baptist, DBU, they do whatever they can. They're also a UCF component of that, where we just do not beat them in baseball. We don't beat UCF either. It's going to be the joke I'll stop making. Yeah, or football, but I'll let that
basketball.
Basketball. Women's tennis. We're killing it though. So with that being said, I unfortunately also see OU. I see Texas doing good as well. But then the other team that's in the top 25 USA Today's coaches poll rankings is Oklahoma State. And really, as long as we don't have to face DBU, then I can be tongue in cheek and be funny about it all I want to, but they're in every single projected of regionals for the Oklahoma State hosts. That's what I see is DBU. And they've come into Stillwater and beat us. We've gone to DBU and they've also beat us. So it doesn't matter. But if I get that out of the way, really, if our bats show up, it's like a home run show. I mean, if our bats show up, we're scoring what Iowa football would be just absolutely jealous of in our baseball scores. We are putting up 10 plus runs a game. When our bats show out, you're hearing that metal ping off the ball. It's a beautiful sound, but also it's just what's going on at O'Brait's Stadium. And so if we can really get that going, then we'll look really, really good. And I don't know though. I could see maybe, for example, we're seeing the Knights here, if they can produce something a little bit too, but really, I think it's going to be OU, Oklahoma State, and Texas. And that's Texas just kind of because they've been there before. OU, they've been there recently. And Oklahoma State because they have some experience in just getting far in the postseason. And then the rest of the Big 12, I go, West Virginia, I just don't feel too confident in. And others, especially when schools are just not doing well, kind of leading up to the regionals as well, too. If you're faltering in the Big 12 tournament, we're seeing lower seeds win. Doesn't give me a lot of enthusiasm or a lot of confidence in you going on after that.
Well, I can tell you, the Big 12 has had a participant in Omaha the last 9 seasons. So that's 9 seasons in a row that we've had a Big 12 participant. West Virginia they got hot towards the end of the season. They've got some hitters. But when you're talking about going through a regional and you're going through a super regional, you're talking about pitching depth. Everybody's pretty much who they're going to be at this point as far as hitting. Now, some people will get hot, but you're going to be pretty consistent. So you're going to have two primary weekend starters that are really good typically. I think OSU has more than that. OU, that I think is their weakness. They've got good pitching staff, but I think their bullpen is not as strong as what OSU's is. Texas's is definitely not. I don't see Texas getting there at all. I think OU and OSU have the best shot. We may end up as a 2 seed if we end up winning whoever we play against tonight. We're currently a 3 seed, slated to go to Tennessee. We had a string of games in the middle of conference where we got swept a couple of games, and that really threw us for a loop. We lost, I think it was one. I think we were 19-3 or something like that out of conference. So it's been a solid season for us. Our bullpen was really, really solid going into it. They kind of fell off there for a little bit. But for me, I think OU has the best shot. I think OSU has a good shot. Let's just put it that way.
I like it. And then gotta say, love to hear it. As long as it's a good shot, we'll take it, because we got the coaches to at least keep us going there. Famous college baseball coaches in the holidays. So after that, I also want to talk here. Coaches on the hot seat in the Big 12 in football here as we kind of round up the podcast. You and I did a little bit of, hey, who's really on the hot seat? Who even stands a chance here? And really, it's just two guys. I think we're figuring out. Dave Aranda, and then the West Virginia head coach, who I forget off the top of my head here. Well, I'll ask you.
Neil Brown.
So who do you think it's has a I guess a worse chance of staying through the year? I don't want to put it the other way where I say a better chance when I get fired, because that's not necessarily a good thing.
So I think honestly, Dave Aranda has the best shot of getting fired. Neil Brown's kind of interesting. He's been on the hot seat the past 2 years, and he's one of those guys that wins enough to make you say, and West Virginia has had some challenges as of late as a football program compared to what they have been. So I think Dave Aranda, honestly, I don't see him lasting this season unless something drastic happens. I don't see that for Baylor. I don't see that from a talent perspective on what's happened from a talent perspective. And I don't see Dave lasting the season. Neil, he's got this season. It's a prove it season for him. And he's done just well enough to give everybody a glimmer of hope, but I don't think that lasts forever either.
Yeah, I don't think Dave Aranda lasts, and that's what's crazy to me is that in 2021 he wins the Big 12 championships. We're not even giving him another 4 years after that. But in the Big 12, it can swing that big, and he's just not putting the talented guys out there. Really the recruiting side for Baylor. I'm not hearing a lot of guys coming in and out, and you'd figure with a private school and with TCU's success as being a close competitor right there in the Dallas Metroplex area, that, hey, you know what? Baylor should be able to have some of that same success. When they're not getting it, I think everyone looks around and goes, okay, so did Chip Miranda Gaines want to get a new coach, and do whatever else they really want to from the Baylor donors? And hey, you know what? We're known for quite a big few things there in Baylor, and being known for football, and Robert Griffin III winning Heisman in the past decade, etc. You keep going here. I mean, they should be a team that is relevant in the new Big 12 here as we reshape it a little bit. So, yeah, I think they let him go. And Neil Brown, when Oklahoma State went into West Virginia last year and ended up pulling off the win, I know it was an expected win from Oklahoma State fans, but it definitely didn't come easy. And a couple things had to go our way. So I don't love going to West Virginia.
Beat us last year. I mean,
yeah.
Again, for UCF, it was an interesting season because we lost a lot of 3-point games, but nobody, and I didn't expect going into that game that West Virginia would be even close. So they're bringing their quarterback back this year. I don't see. There was a lot of energy, for West Virginia last year for getting rid of him. I don't see him doing enough to last another season. They're gonna have to make one of those moves to move on. And Dave Aranda, again, from a recruiting perspective, I don't think he's done enough. And I just don't see him being successful enough to last the year with the expectations that Baylor has.
Yeah, I don't either. Baylor should have high expectations, and I've unfortunately seen it and saw the Big 12 championship in person, where I'm still going, hey, just run into the corner. You know, don't dive for the pylon. Just run into the corner and see what happens. You get tackled inbounds. It's the last play of the game. But anyways, I'll let all my Oklahoma State fandom kind of try to sit at the doorstep here a little bit and put it at the side for this episode of the Big 12 Huddle. So, Roger, as always, thanks for joining here. Where can everyone find and learn more about you guys in your show here of the Knights? Not golden at all, just in color, just not in name.
Yeah, or Space U or the Knots, if we want to go with that. You know, whatever you want to go with. If you like blues, go with the Knots. But yes, it's definitely the Knights, not the Golden Knights. So you can find us on YouTube at the Knighted Ones podcast. You can find us on IG and Twitter on the Knighted Ones. We record weekly. We have folks on from our fellow huddlers on, and it's actually kind of funny because it's become a joke, because I said in one of the episodes, instead of saying College Huddle, I said Cuddle. So it's become a thing now for us. But check us out there, interact with us. You know, we do YouTube shorts, we do YouTube videos. You can also find us on all the podcast channels. So, and distribution channels. So if it's Spotify, if it's Apple, if it's Spreaker, whatever your flavor, you can find us there. So thank you so much for having us on again this week.
Yeah, of course. Thanks so much for joining, and please follow, of course, the College Huddle here as you're listening on YouTube, and please subscribe. But don't let me forget, follow at the CGA Tour on all social media platforms: TikTok, Instagram, X, YouTube as well. Subscribe with all the links and information here below. I'll link Roger as well, of course, and thank you guys so much for listening. Catch you again soon.
Charge up.